1. I have had what can only be described as a haunting when I moved into my first flat in Colchester, and I've been followed by something. I was very fortunate in getting the main suite when I moved into the new building. The building is owned by the owner of the George Hotel. This isn't surprising, as the building that was turned into flats is directly next to the George Hotel itself. If you know, you know. The George is famous for being haunted. At the time, the refurbishment had just finished from an old office, I think, to the new 6 properties in the building. I was in my early 20s and was really enjoying the fact that my new flat was roughly 12 footsteps from a large popular high street bar. Bringing girls back was why. I was number 6, and everything seems really good. I was happy and enjoying having my own space, as I had just moved out of my parents' house. For some reason, after about 6 months or so, possibly a year, I would wake up and go to my kitchen and find my bin toppled over and my kettle had moved. At the time, I didn't believe in such things and just ignored it, thinking that there is a rational explanation for everything, right? One day, I was taking my bin bags out to the outside bins for collection when I heard, "Lawrence, can you come here for a moment?" My neighbor Alana. My first thought was, oh man, what now? Have I been gaming too loudly at night or something? But no, she seemed very worried. I remember this conversation like it was yesterday. "So I need to ask you something, but I don't want you to think I'm crazy or anything like that. But have you noticed anything weird happening around here?" My bin, toaster, and kettle seem to move on their own, but I'm sure it's all due to something explainable, right? Like building work making the building shake or something? I'm so happy you said that. I don't think that's quite it, as more violent things are happening to me in my flat. At this point, I knew she was going to say ghosts or something, and as I say, I was very skeptical then. I wasn't going to be rude about it, so I thought I would just hear her out, reassure her, then go back to what I was doing. This isn't exactly how it went. Alana, who is a very strong, independent, rational, and intelligent person, went on to explain how her duvet has been ripped off of her during the night, and things like her bin lid had been thrown at her with extreme force, as well as things not being where they were supposed to live. Just everyday items around the house. Alana took a photo of her fridge. There was a legitimate reason why, but I can't remember. Something about showing her mum what the flat looked like or something. Alana was alone at the time, but in the picture, the reflection on the fridge door reflected an image of her bed, studio flat. And there's a man, clear as day, sitting on the end. Alana lives alone. I live alone, so I had no explanation. A few nights later, there was a knock on the door, and when I answered, it was her. "No, hello, or sorry to disturb you this late. All she said is, 'I need to stay here tonight.' Bit forward, but whatever. I made up my bed for her and I slept on the sofa in the living room. During that night, my Xbox controller was launched right at my head, breaking it. The controller, not my head, although it hurt like a bitch. This went on for some time, and Alana kept staying at mine, which, during that time, we went on some dates and decided to get together. The process of living together made for a very active nightlife in my flat. On one occasion, my speakers that were not plugged into the power outlet, nor my PC, let out a very loud growl at 3 a.m. I jumped out of bed trying to figure out if there is a grizzly bear in the closet or something, and Alana says, "Get back to sleep, it's fine, it's just him again." I'd had enough by this point, so agreed with Alana, who had been pestering me to bring a medium into the flat. I really didn't believe any of that stuff at the time, but if it meant I could sleep again, then I would try anything. The medium came by 2 days later and refused to go in either Alana's or my flat. She was saying things like, "He's really angry and hates women," or he doesn't like men standing in his way. She did say something weird that I still don't quite understand to this day, which was, "There's a portal between the 2 front doors," 5 and 6. She left saying that her presence was making it worse. Honestly, at that time, I thought she was quoting Paranormal Activity, the movie, to look cool. Bad load of good she was. But we ended up calling her back because something truly awful happened. Roughly a week later, Alana was walking around the flat between the hours of 1 to 3 a.m. So I turned the lights on, asking what she was doing, and she wouldn't respond. She was ice cold and wouldn't talk. And she wouldn't stop staring at me, no matter where I was. Okay, So up to now, I've been patient, but it's fucking 3 a.m. If the problem won't leave, what happens if I remove us from the problem? Should fix it, right? I got her dressed and coat on, and we walked out of the flat and up the road where Alana began speaking, saying things like, "We need to go back. Bad chances of that place sucks." We got about 3 blocks away, and then Alana said something that legit scared me. "Why are we outside by the post office?" Okay, well, I think we should move is why we are here. We eventually moved together, but paranormal activity, in general, would keep happening where we moved to. I can safely say that this was nowhere near as angry as whatever the fuck was back at the high street. Due to the stress of it all, we broke up and went our separate ways. Since then, I get the odd bit of paranormal activity all these years later. I'm 31 and very happy with my new partner, but I wish I knew why what happened, and why I still get things happening from time to time. If anyone can enlighten me or educate me on what exactly happened, I would greatly appreciate it. One last additional piece of information is that the medium person said that I am a beacon. I looked it up, and I'm still unsure. Thank you in advance to anyone who can shine some light on the situation. Lawrence. 2. After a pretty dismal experience working at a supermarket, I had spent over a year applying for a new position, but this landed me no success. However, within a year, I was beginning to pull myself together. I began training as a hairdresser in the north of England, whilst at the same time continuing to look for a source of additional income, and after a couple of weeks searching in my local city, I found an advertisement for a supervisor's job in a newsagent's. At first, I felt apprehensive about working in retail again, but after discovering that the staff of 6 were as friendly as could possibly be, I decided to give it a go. On the day of the interview, the manager led me through the downstairs stockroom and up a short, narrow flight of stairs to a small office. Once in there, she asked me the common interview questions, and ended up telling me she thought I seemed a friendly and respectful individual, and was willing to let me start the job almost immediately. Yet, what I didn't realize was that this interview was not going to categorize as anything fundamentally average. After the basic employment paperwork was sorted, she offered to take me on a quick tour of the upstairs stockrooms, to which I casually accepted. So, leading me through an opening directly next to the doorway of the office, me and her entered the stockroom. It was a neatly laid out place. Items were stocked in a systematic order around the room. Directly ahead of the entrance to the room was a small kitchen as well. However, after leading me back out in the hallway, the manager led me through a doorway and down a rather tired-looking corridor. The outcome was the derelict remains of what seemed like the setup of an old flat. Soft drinks were sorted in one room, which had a large window facing directly out into the street. Opposite this room was what seemed to be an old dining room or kitchen. In it was what seemed to be any decorative or display items left over from the shop floor. It basically seemed like a storeroom for rubbish. And out in the hallway of these 2 rooms was a short flight of stairs with a half-space landing leading up the next floor. On this landing was a large Georgian-style window which lit the hallway up significantly with daylight. Upon entering the front storeroom, the manager abruptly asked me a simple question.
"How'd you feel about ghosts, by the way?"
I was slightly taken by surprise when she asked me this. "Well, I'm a firm believer. Why? Don't tell me you've got one."
"We do indeed. She's an old lady called Connie. We've actually had somebody walk into the shop with his family and tell us he could sense something upstairs. He told us that Connie was the old resident of the building when it was still a house."
"How did she die then?" I asked uneasily.
"According to the psychic, she got trapped in a walk-in cupboard in the empty flat above us and eventually died. If you feel like doubting what he said, I've had delivery drivers come in and tell us there's an old lady looking out the window above the front door."
"Have you seen her?"
"No, but we hear things pretty often. Although, if you do come up here to fetch any stock, just make sure to say hi to her."
Out of my instinctive fear of the unknown, I decided then and there to introduce myself to the spirit. "Hi, Connie. My name's Unsystemic Writer.
Nice to meet you. I'm the new employee. Merely seconds after I'd spoken, a loud bang came from upstairs, along with the sound of shuffling feet. Me and the manager looked up at the ceiling. Their expression was one of expectation, whereas I simply laughed in sheer disbelief. Was that her? Remaining silent, the manager nodded. My job began with a lot of till work, along with the enlisted care of the alcohol replenishment. I would often have to make trips upstairs throughout the day. All this time I would greet Connie in a pleasant manner and chat away to her as if she were there in the flesh. Yet after a couple of weeks, I began to learn just how powerful a spirit she was. During a morning shift, my colleague was helping me serve a busy rush, and upon a customer's request for a packet of cigarettes, my colleague turned around and opened the cabinet. Without question, nearly every packet of cigarettes stacked up came flying out of the open door of the cabinet and pelted him. Another experience was when I was looking up at the end of the day and turning the lights out upstairs. Making my way to the stairs, I bid Connie good night. The moment I looked away, however, I heard feet stomping on the wooden floor of the corridor towards the stockroom. The footsteps were approaching me as well. Fear then overtook me, and I just bolted down the stairs and out the staff exit. During my time settling into the shop, I would often hear footsteps above the shop floor and hear objects being thrown around. Occasionally, I swore I would hear a voice moaning as well. Additionally, whilst carrying stock down the stairs one day, I turned around at the bottom only to see a pair of knee-high legs in stockings, and wearing buckled shoes following me down the staircase. Although what I didn't know was that the most conclusive paranormal experience in my mind was yet to come. It was the day of the large delivery, and I was tasked with carrying most of the stock upstairs. I managed this pretty easily within a couple of hours. However, once we reopened the shop, my boss realized she had forgotten to take up a box of thermal paper rolls. So, because I had just finished restocking crisps, she asked me to take them up to the flat while she served the customers. Reluctantly, I complied. I walked down the corridor slowly, feeling so apprehensive that I began to hold my breath. I peered into the derelict kitchen and told Connie I would only be quick. Hurriedly, I walked into the room and placed a box next to the old sink. However, once I turned around to leave, a couple of old but nevertheless large display stands laying on the floor rattled loudly. I turned my head and saw them moving across the floor towards me with a frightening speed. I felt as if I was going to vomit and nearly tripped and fell as I tried to run away so fast. I sprinted down the corridor and back to the stairs into the shop. My boss could only fall into hysterics when she saw my face as pale as a sheet, and the fact I was hyperventilating. From that day on, I refused to ever enter the flat again. Even my colleagues felt the same way. I still see and hear the occasional visit from Connie, but over the past few months, she has calmed down significantly. Put it this way, what I first deemed would be a boring retail job turned out to be an experience beyond the comprehension of what I believed I would see and hear in my life. So what do you think of such occurrences? I hope you enjoyed my tale. 3. I currently live in the United States. Out of college, I took a job in Australia on a horse farm. Then I was 21, and this was my first major job. I loved it. When I arrived, I moved into the original home on the property, which was smack dab in the middle of 400 acres. Close by the main house and the barns, but fenced, and had considerable privacy, and no one bothered us. During my time there, we had an influx of seasonal workers coming and going, and the owner traveled frequently to other farms and overseas. So much of the time I would be left alone on the property in the evenings. The house itself was a moderate-sized rancher, 3 bedrooms, 1 bath shower, and laundry room. We mainly used the back sliding glass door to come and go from the house. From the day I moved in, the sliding glass door rollers were broken. It was old and heavy glass, and you had to lift it and push it hard to open it. But the back entrance went to the garden, had nice views, and is where we frequented for tea breaks. As soon as I moved in, I immediately got feelings of being watched,
but I wasn't hearing anything. A few weeks after the move, I had an almost lucid dream. I was laying in bed, and I looked up, and at the foot of my bed stood a woman in a full-length dress, purple lace, high neck and sleeves. Looked 1890s, maybe. The woman looked middle-aged, late 40s to 50s. Her hair was pinned up in a bun on top. The only way I knew she was upset of my presence was the look on her face. She looked like she wanted me out. She didn't say anything, didn't move, just stood there staring, and suddenly I awoke and she was gone. I had this same dream many times while I lived there. The only thing that changed was her face. It seemed to soften the longer I was there, but occasionally she looked angry or upset. After a time, I believed that she resided in the home with us, and was just there. She didn't seem to do much around the house other than watch and show up in dreams. She actually has little to do with this story other than to give context to what I believed was in the house up until this point. So let's fast forward to 5 months later. All my previous housemates have left, and it's just me in the house now. I had a nice day at work on the farm. It was a busy and bustling day. Lots of people on the property. It was winter in Australia, if you want to call it that, but the days were a bit shorter. I climbed into bed around 8, my norm, and usually just sit with my laptop and play games, browse the web, and make calls home to family in the US. So I had been in bed probably about an hour now, just relaxing. It's dark out now. Suddenly I hear the sliding glass door push open, and someone take 4 heavy steps into the house. It sounded like heavy work boots, and it shook the house. Everything went suddenly quiet. I freaked. I jumped up and grabbed whatever I could find, which happened to be an old heavy shot glass. We didn't have a lot of cups, and I'm not a big drinker. It's just what we had. And my alarm clock, which was one of those old ringing ones with the hammer between the 2 bells. I guess I figured I'd throw stuff at the intruder. No one ever entered the house without a knock or at least a call-out. After a few minutes of getting my nerve up, I entered the hallway and walked into the kitchen. No one was there, no person, no boots, and the sliding glass door was closed. I never heard it close, only open. I opened the sliding glass door and called out. I grabbed a flashlight and beamed it around looking for anyone. I was panicked and looking for answers, so I desperately called the farm manager to see if he had stopped by. He answered, and panicking, I asked if he had been there. He said no. I said, well, maybe the owner has stopped by looking for me, and he corrected me. He said that the owner was with him, and they were 2 hours away at the races, and that there should be no one else on the property. At this point, I was very unnerved. I spent the next 4 hours calling family overseas and unable to sleep. Many weeks after this, I ran into one of the farm hands who had left prior to the event, and he mentioned he didn't have a real bed while he stayed at the house. We kinda laughed about it, and I was like, should have asked for a bed frame or something. He slept with the mattress on the floor. The room he stayed in was right off the kitchen and directly across from the sliding glass doors. Somehow we got on the topic of the kitchen light being left on at night. I was always first to bed, so I never turned it off. And even after everyone left, I just continued to leave it on, not thinking about it, at least not consciously, maybe subconsciously. He mentioned he never turned it off either, and in fact would always turn it on before heading to bed if it wasn't already. When I asked why, he said it was because he often heard footsteps in the kitchen, and he could see light under his bedroom door and wanted to see if anyone was there. He never saw shadows, or anyone else for that matter. 4. I recently unlocked this memory after hearing a similar story, so I will share it with you in case someone else has a similar memory or experience. It was summertime, around the late noughties. I was having a sleepover with my cousin in the basement of my grandparents' house. Things were difficult with her part of the family, so we tended to have a lot of sleepovers around this time. The layout of the basement was set up as follows. A pull-out sofa was on the furthest wall. This is where her and I slept. I was on the left side of the pull-out, and there was a side table with a lamp that we kept on throughout the night, so it wasn't pitch black as we slept. In front of us, there was a wall that had the TV, and behind the wall was the laundry room, which had an open doorway to it, causing the light to leak out into the main room of the basement. I woke up in the night sometime. A loud, clanging noise had woken me up. It sounded like someone hitting a thick metal pipe with a crowbar. It was coming from the laundry room. I was confused, but stayed in bed. I looked at the light coming from the laundry room. There was a large silhouette in the light that kept growing like it was getting closer, all while the clanging noise was getting louder. By now, I checked if my cousin was awake. She wasn't. I thought it was strange, since the noise was so loud. I decided not to wake her. When I looked back at the laundry room, there it was, exiting the laundry room ever so slowly. It was a typical depiction of the Grim Reaper, hidden in a cloak, carrying a scythe in its skeletal hand. The sound it was accompanied with was coming from the chain and ball that was around its ankle. I wasn't scared at this point. I didn't feel like it was threatening to me, but of course, as a child, seeing something like that would terrify anyone. My fear only increased when the following happened. It turned and looked at me. The endless depth of the hood just stared at me. I quickly hid under the covers, my back facing my cousin. I still feel it was there, looking at me. After I don't know how long, the clanging continued, getting quieter as it got further away from me. I assumed it had gone upstairs and then just left. I couldn't go back to sleep after that. I remember grabbing my DS from the side table with the lamp, turning it on and playing some music from a game I liked. Only then could I go back to sleep. In the morning I didn't say anything about it and eventually just moved on. It's possible that the Reaper wasn't there to visit me, but instead my cousin. Later on, in the coming months, her mother passed away due to cancer. Part of me feels bad for making that conclusion, though. I'm not prone to sleep paralysis. No one in my family that is biologically related to me is. Along with that, my grandmother, who I lived with during childhood, is very religious and didn't allow me to watch programs that would have things she deemed as evil. Thus, I would not have witnessed anything that would have looked like what I saw. There was another encounter that happened to me in that laundry room when I was 15, but I don't know if that's related. Anyway, that's it. Let me know what you think, if you feel so obliged. And thank you for taking the time to read. 5. My family consisted of my mom, Zelda, my dad, Bill, me, my brothers, Bill, 14, and Freddie, 13, and my sister, Betsy, 12. Real names, since as far as I know, they're all walking the streets of gold. To say we were poor is putting it mildly. We lived in a 2-bedroom house, with the Sibs and I sleeping in one room while Mom and Dad slept in the other. I think the rent was $50 a month, late 1960s. None of the houses had a bathroom, no toilet, no sink, except in the kitchen, and no bathtub or shower. Instead, we used a chamber pot at night, or the outhouse about 50 feet outside the back door. Betsy and I wouldn't go in there, because it was full of wasps and spiders, roaches and flies. To take a bath, we used what Dad would call a number 10 washtub, and heated the water on the stove. Easter Sunday, after church, we were watching King of Kings, an Easter tradition in our family, when I got the urge to go pee. The chamber pot was located in the bedroom my Sibs and I slept in. I'm sure some of you know what a shotgun house is. Clearest explanation is a house you can stand in the front door, shoot a shotgun and not hit anything until it went out the back door. Our house had been a duplex, 2 identical houses side by side. They removed the kitchen on one side and turned it into an enclosed porch. I walked through my parents' bedroom to the door of my bedroom and stopped in the doorway. Standing beneath the light was a figure of light. They looked to be about 8 feet tall, with white hair and white gown. I stood there, unable to move, heart pounding. Realizing I really needed to pee, I rushed forward and pulled the chain. The figure disappeared. I sat down in the pot and happened to look out our bedroom window. Mom had cottage curtains over them, but the lower one were about 6 to 8 inches higher than one would normally hang them. From the ground to the top panes of the window, it was about 8 to 10 feet. The angel was looking through the window at me. I say it was an angel, although I wasn't sure. As soon as I finished, I went into the living room and sat on the floor by Betsy. "Are you okay?" she whispered. "Yeah, why?" "You're as white as a ghost." "Tell you later." I often wonder if it was an angel or something else. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 5 True Paranormal Stories, episode 253. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. If you enjoyed the video, then please do like and subscribe. Comments are also appreciated and helpful. Let's see. Nope. Right, no birthday shoutouts today, I don't think. No, I think there's one on Saturday, though. No other shoutouts as well. Okay, we're good there. Okay, I'm going to keep the rest of the outro a little bit brief. Then I'm going to go rest for a bit. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourself.